All right, welcome to the Muddy Waters podcast. This is Chuck Ellis. Hopefully, you can hear me. I'm live from Nairobi, Kenya, where I'm visiting my wife. And many of you know from most of my podcasts. There's a picture of me and my wife at our wedding behind me. Not today, obviously. Because I'm in an Airbnb in Nairobi, and so I'm here continuing to host the Muddy Waters podcast, which exists to help the people of Maine better understand what's going on in our state. Unfortunately, the mainstream media, as we highlighted on my most recent podcast with Representative Laurel Libby, just how incredibly biased the media was, and if they weren't, how different our state would be, and how likely we'd have full Republican leadership in Augusta. And so ultimately, we exist to come alongside organizations that are doing incredible work like the Maine Wire and Maine X community. I'd be remiss if I didn't talk a little bit about like the stuff that they've uncovered that is going national, because it's connected to what's going on out in Minnesota with the incredible amounts of fraud being perpetrated by the Somali community. And so what we try to do alongside them is kind of tell stories. It's really easy in 2024 and 2025, I should say. Geez, what year am I in? It's about to be 2026, and I'm a year behind. Anyway, but in today's world, people, I think facts and statistics are much less likely to convince people of anything, but stories have a lot more power. And so what we do is we tell the real stories from people who are around the state of what's actually going on, so that people can't be like, that's not happening, because we actually have done the interviews, and you can listen to people tell their story. You can judge whether or not you think they're lying, but at least you get to hear their story. And so we're fortunate today to have with us I was going to say the president, I might get it wrong, but the chair of the College Republicans from the University of Maine at Orono, Payton Warren. Thanks for joining us, Payton.
Yeah, it's great to be on here.
Yeah, it's really great to have you. I think I've got a little bit of a delay, so people at home, hopefully it's not too much of a problem. And same thing with you, Payton. And if for whatever reason I disappear, which has happened to some people before, just find something to talk about really quickly. It's a lesson in deer in front of the headlights. But yeah, I really wanted to have you on, because I think in general, one of the things that we're seeing largely, I think this was a movement that was happening anyway, but especially in the wake of the CharlieKirk assassination, is we're seeing the youth begin to rise up, and a lot of the youth seem to be rejecting the woke nonsense. And so I want to hear from as many younger conservatives who want to speak out and be public with their views and values as possible. And so I was really excited to have the opportunity to bring you on. And I'm curious, what your story is, how you got to the place of being involved in politics and being willing to be public about being a conservative in the university system in 2025. And so, yeah, I'll just kind of let you kind of go and kind of tell your story, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, no, I would 100% say that throughout my life, I mean, my family's pretty liberal. I'm one of the only conservatives in my entire family, so it was always very easy for me to be able to express myself, because my family let me express myself as a conservative, but they're not conservative. You don't see that much anymore, but yeah, no, I think how I got started through politics was going into my church and doing community service. I have over 1,000 hours between my high school career. Vinalhaven, where I'm from, doesn't have very much partisan politics at all. So I didn't really get involved in partisan politics for a very long time until I got to college. My roommate so happened to be completely random roommate from Massachusetts, not even from Maine. Ended up being the president of CollegeRepublicans, or the chair. And I soon joined him as a vice chair, and then I'm now the current chair. During the summer in between my first and second year, I became a selectman of Vinalhaven, serving my community and working for the betterment of Maine in my local community, when my county, Knox County, is very, very solidly blue. I ran unenrolled and I won the majority of the vote, and I'm going to do the best I can to help my community at UMaine and on Vinalhaven.
Nice. So help me understand a little. There's a couple things, questions I have immediately, but one of them is
Yeah.
like, so how is it that you ended up being a conservative in the midst of a liberal family? Like, how did you come to that place of being conservative? Because most of the time, people learn their values, their views and values from their parents, from their community.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, help me, especially in 2025, 2024, well, leading up to 2025, how that happened. What were the primary driving factors that caused you to reject the liberal ideology of your family?
I would say it's 100% my faith. I'm Christian. I originally was raised Mormon, and now I am Catholic. Going through, basically Mormonism to traditional Baptist and traditional Protestantism, and then to Catholicism. I really learned that I have a special connection that cannot be broken with God like everyone else does. I just try to prioritize it. And that's what made me conservative. I'm definitely a Christian before a conservative 100% of the time. You can't be conservative if you're not going to conserve the Bible's values of they're over 2,000 years old. You can't be a progressive. There's no such thing as progressive Christianity. Because you have to conserve values, and people will always try to push and change Christianity for what it is, and you can't.
Yeah, it's interesting. They keep trying, and what ends up happening is the group that changes, they end up dying. Those churches die, right? Like you had the mainline denominations that abandoned the truth of like historic biblical Christianity, we could say, and they have largely like they're dying churches. Like they're just filled with older people.
Church.
Because they don't actually believe the gospel anymore. They've shifted to a social gospel that just has to do with so being social justice warriors, keyboard warriors and all that, but like showing up to No Kings rallies and stuff like that. That apparently is what their faith is limited to. Anyway, it's interesting. So your faith, so that's it. That's a really interesting story. We could probably do a whole podcast on that. We won't today, but like how, because I know that leaving Mormonism isn't as bad as challenging necessarily as leaving some other faiths, but it is like I think it's hard to maintain relationships with your family when you leave the Mormon church. Is that correct? Has that been your experience as well?
Yeah, I would say the church that I was in was Reformed Latter-day Saints, which is a different denomination of Mormonism. And once that denomination died, the church was going to get sold to the regular Mormon church, but never did. So I was raised Mormon, and there's still Mormons in my church. But now it's considered a Congregationalist church, for my church back home at least, in Vinalhaven, because the original Latter-day Saints church tried to sell it from underneath the people that lived on the island.
Oh wow,
that's a very long story, but yeah. It's an interesting story.
Yeah. Well, like I said, maybe at a later date we'll do it. I am thinking of branching off with the help of a guy by the name of John Andrade, who's been a guest on the podcast a number of times, and doing a more directly faith-oriented. It'll obviously tie in at some point to politics in different ways because that's largely what I do these days. But I think I'm going to do something different with that. Maybe we'll have you on at some point if you're open to it, to kind of talk more about all of that, because I think it's a really interesting thing. But so your faith led you to, which like I said, I agree with. I think you can't be a Christian that holds the historic teachings of Christianity and the Bible, and be a progressive. I just don't think it's really an option there, because you like all the progressives are trying to move away from historic, anything, right? We're trying to progress beyond. We think that Jesus wasn't enough. We've got to go beyond whatever it was. Jesus pointed us in the right direction, I think, is what they would probably say. But now we need to continue to move. Anyway, it's a bunch of nonsense. But okay, so that's what kind of shifted you to having more conservative views and values.
100%.
And then you went to the University of Maine at Orono, and were immediately, by divine intervention, we might say, as believers, he plopped you right down with the chair of the College Republicans, setting you up to enter into, as you called it, partisan politics. But one of the questions for you, again, I have my own views, but I'm always curious about what other people think. Like you talk about like the fact that there's partisan politics and then there's nonpartisan politics. Like, and I know that technically there's this idea that like city councils and school boards and things like that, those are nonpartisan. It's like, but are they? I mean, is a Democrat ever not a Democrat? Is a Republican ever not a Republican? It's like, well, no, this is a school board, so I'm going to set aside all my views and values.
In Maine, it's always a Democrat. It's always a Democrat being a Democrat, and then a lot of the time, it's usually a Republican being a Democrat. They'll usually, I feel like a lot of Republicans will definitely swing, and especially in Maine, just because of how moderate we can be. But man, I've seen, I mean, even like people like Rick Bennett, like all through Maine legislation, state like boards and stuff like that, people flip. That's just how it goes in Maine, and it's kind of a shame, but it's how it goes.
Well, it is a shame, and I think like there's this like this, you know, it's really interesting. There's this idealism, I think, that has infected some conservatives, right? Is like, well, ideally, we're going to try to be the bigger people, and we're going to try to like bridge the gap, and like let's see how we can work together with the Democrats. Well, working together with the Democrats at this point is doing what the Democrats want and not doing what what conservatives want. Like you're being forced to bend on very strong principles. And what's interesting, to your point about how conservatives tend to be much more likely to bend, and Rick Bennett, former Republican Rick Bennett, former chair of the Maine Republican Party, Rick Bennett, who is like voted to keep biological males in girls' sports, and has been a little wishy-washy on his reasoning as to why, in my opinion. But like you have a lot of the people like this throughout our state, and especially, as you said, in local government. What's interesting, one of the things that we found as I've paid closer attention to like school boards and city councils is if my brain will click in, the liberals, the Democrats, as you said, kind of to reiterate what you said, a Democrat is always a Democrat. So the Democrats, like they could be in the minority, they could be down 11-1, and they're going to rant and rave the same nonsense regardless, right? They could, or they could have the majority and know that the people are going to vote them out of their position because of what they're doing, and they're going to do it anyway. It doesn't matter how many people you bring to a school board to try and challenge the Democrats who are in school boards or city councils to change their views or values, change their decision. They're going to stick to what they believe, whereas Republicans tend to be much weaker. They need support. They need people to show up and voice what they already know that the people believe, but they're, unfortunately, some of it's out of, I think it's out of cowardice. And I'm not in that position. It's really easy to judge people from without the position, but it's, I don't have another word for it. I can't think of another reason why you would not stand true to your principles outside of cowardice. If you're a conservative and you don't vote in favor of things that conservatives believe, even if you have the majority, simply because you're afraid of the way in which the crazy Democrats manipulate and try to make you feel like you're a horrible human being. But anyway, but being on the select board, you can respond to what I just said, but you can also, like, I'm also curious, as your experience, like what led you to get to the point where you decided to run for select board, what that process was like, and what it's been like being on the select board.
Yeah, no, I mean, with me being a selectman, it comes with its perks. I really do like it, and I really like helping the community. And I try to stay helping the community, but there are certain things you can't bend on your beliefs. Can't do that. And with school board, it's people will put their beliefs aside, and that's what they do. But I feel like with a select board, it's more monetary, it's less social problems, and focusing on what's best policy for your town is a lot easier if you're focusing on economic policy, and rather than social issues. Now, with Vinalhaven has a massive project called the Downtown Project that's being basically funded completely by the Maine state government. And we're doing a lot I'm making sure that a lot of the downtown project is being done properly and not compromising small businesses and working waterfronts. Considering that Vinalhaven is an island, we need to prioritize the island people over, summer people and the people that gentrify the islands. It happens a lot more on North Haven than it does on Vinalhaven, but it's still a problem. It can be a problem.
Wait, so it sounds like you're saying, because this what you're talking about here, I think has echoes of other things that are going on in our society, which is that, as a town, similar to as a country, for instance, you need to prioritize the citizens of that town, not other people. Right? Like similar to like what we're having in our country, prioritize United States citizens over against people who are not citizens of the United States, right?
Yeah. I think prioritizing the people of Vinalhaven is what we need to be doing, and letting them own and have their belongings and stuff like that, because sometimes stuff just happens. I mean, on the island, there's not much of a police enforcement. There could honestly, there could be a lot that goes wrong that people don't understand. Me going to the University of Maine, I can see what happens in Orono and around the state compared to what happens in Vinalhaven, and I can see a lot of the things that are happening on the mainland happen on Vinalhaven, and Vinalhaven doesn't have any safeguards. We lock our cars, we have police enforcement. There's a lot of stuff that could go wrong that people don't realize.
Wow. So how do you handle that, like as a community, right, without having as much police enforcement?
It's more of kind of like the people rule the island in some kind of way. A lot of the time, if people don't like you, most people just move off. And that's kind of how it is. It's always been that way. It's a very interesting place to grow up and an interesting perspective to bring to UMaine. It's a bit of a change, but it's interesting.
Yeah, I can only imagine. I've never lived on an
but
island. I've visited a few islands, but never lived on an island. And I just feel like the island communities are very unique and interesting. And there's a different perspective that I think comes from growing up there that I think is valuable. And I think obviously going to a place like UMaine Orono is going to be a very different perspective. For sure. So at the University of Maine at Orono, what's your major? What are you studying?
I'm a triple major, double minor, so I do a lot. I'm a financial econ major, finance, management, legal studies, and leadership studies. I like to kind of be like a Swiss Army knife for whoever I'm going to work for in the future. And I think that's a strong skill set for my passion in politics, but also my business, what I want to do in the business world. And I probably will go back for my MBA, and I'll be able to help the political movement and my business career for another year as well. So, University of Maine has given me a lot of opportunities that I think I would never get if I was on Vinalhaven. But Vinalhaven does help me pay for a lot of my education, which I'm very grateful for and blessed for, I would say.
How does it do that?
There's a lot of scholarships that help island kids get off the island.
Okay.
And it's great programs, very good programs that keep the kids in school by helping them, and they help them financially, and it makes it so the change isn't as bad. It can be very difficult for some kids, and a lot of people end up dropping out. But there is some of us that figure out our ways and find our group, like me getting into politics, and strive to be better and live more of a normal life on the mainland, I guess. But
Yeah, absolutely. Well, so tell me, because one of the other things that I'm interested in. I'm always interested to find out, because like everybody's different. Everybody has some different views and values and things like that. I think I get a sense, because like Christianity, your faith, your Catholic faith is a
Yeah.
big part of what causes you to have conservative values. So I can make some assumptions about like what are the particular
Yeah.
issues that are the ones that really drive you to be a conservative. But like, what are your biggest issues? What are they? And yeah.
Well, I would say from my being from an island, I always have been intrigued by environmental issues. And I feel like Republicans in Maine don't really have a solution to the climate problems that Maine will face in the future. Abortion, of course, very anti-abortion. I'm also more, as I study economics, so I understand a lot of people in politics can't stand economic policy, but it is so important to your political opinion if you can understand basic economics and then what numbers are telling people. And in the future, it does not look very strong on the economic side of the United States. And I think that's one of the biggest issues that goes completely underneath everybody's head, goes right over everybody's head.
Yeah, it's interesting, because I do think the environmentalist movement and the climate change posse, which first it was global warming, and then it became global climate change, and then anyway, and now Bill Gates has walked back some of his statements, saying, "Oh, the sky isn't actually falling as much as we were telling you it was. We just were trying to manipulate you."
They love to lie about it, but it's yeah.
There are some real environmental issues, which is interesting, because I do think that like there are definitely areas where Republicans do care about the environment. There's this myth that Republicans just don't care about the environment at all. I think that like some of the challenges, like the dissipation of rainforests, the destruction, I should say, the clear cutting of rainforests, and the amounts of like smog that's being created. There are things that are real environmental concerns. The issue that we tend to take is that the Democrats' response to it is like idiotic and is destructive to human life in a way that is insane. But the other issue that you spoke abortion, we're on the same page there. But the other issue you spoke about is probably one of the major factors that pushed me to pay so much attention to politics. As a Christian, I'm definitely pro-life. It's something that my first speech that I gave as a kid in like sixth grade, I think we had speech every year from 6th, 7th, and 8th, maybe 5th. I can't remember. The first one that I ever gave was on why I thought I was pro-life, and I thought that was the only position that really makes sense. Somehow the mainstream media and the left has convinced women that the only right that is important to them is the ability to murder an unborn baby, which blows. I don't understand how so many people have bought into that nonsense, because like today's women who get abortions and don't have families are miserable, and most of them are on SSRIs because they don't enjoy life. And it's like, but I'm wrong. Okay. But even though that's a really big issue, and from a moral perspective is a huge issue for Christians, I think I'd gotten to the place where like going through college, I was really exercising my faith and talking to people, and it was basically like Roe versus Wade is never going to be overturned. So like part of me had just kind of like looked at that issue as like, we're not going to make any progress on that. And so I didn't see it as an issue that I was going to spend a lot of time working towards. Now, maybe that was a mistake. But the issue that really motivated me to pay a lot of attention to politics, and really some of it drove me into politics, is the economic stuff, is what you're talking about there. Because you hear things like these people who are socialists, and Bernie Sanders, when he was running for president, he's like, well, he has these economists that say that, actually socialism will grow the economy. It's like, then they need to give their degrees back. Like there's no there is economic theory, but there's no practical examples of any type of situation where increasing taxes to the degrees that these people are talking about would actually benefit the economy. It's idiotic to suggest it. It ruins the economy. There's so many other things, but that's one of the biggest things that drives me. And really, like one of the biggest concerns for, as you said, for the future of the United States of America is economics, and specifically if America loses its position as being the reserve currency for the world. That is frightening. Is the short version. It's frightening.
Yeah, it's a global catastrophe almost, in my opinion.
In America, so in mine too. America collapses overnight, and then World War III ensues. Like that just seems to me to be what happens at that point, which is not good for anyone, because like the entire world economy at this point is tied into the US dollar. I mean, people all across the world, I didn't realize this until I started traveling internationally, but if you talk to people, they actually hold their money as much as they can. They like to anyway in US dollars. The banks, in Kenya and Egypt and everywhere, they have their local currency, and then they have US dollar accounts that you can have in Kenya, Rwanda, Egypt, all across the world, because it's a stable currency. It's been the most stable currency, most trustworthy. And so if that changes, not only, yes, America implodes, but it actually has a terrible ripple effect throughout the entire world economy. I think most people don't understand economics. They don't even understand basic economics. It's funny. I don't know if you've heard about this, but they're talking about how it's looking like prices for real estate and rent prices nationally are starting to go down as deportations are happening, and people are surprised. Have you noticed that? Were you surprised that rent prices were going to come down when we reduce the demand?
Yeah, when you reduce the demand, it increases the supply. I mean, I don't know if I need to go to college for that.
It's literally basic economics. This is not like master's degree in economics level. Yeah. This is basic supply and demand. The increases in supply drive price up. Increases in demand drive price up. Increases in supply bring the price down. Period, right? And so when you decrease the demand, that brings the price down with the same supply.
If you want to take it like kind of like a step further, it helps the government if they don't have to subsidize rents and stuff like that and buying homes. And the state of Maine has done that a lot of the time when they're introducing this new Mainer program. I don't like it, but it hurts the state of Maine. And from a national level, when they do these subsidies, they don't know where the money goes. They never do. They have no idea. Even at Minnesota's level of what's going on there, they have no idea where that money's going. Their taxpayers have no idea that they're directly subsidizing somebody else's life without them working at all. And they have no idea that's happening.
No, that whole situation is absolutely wild. But like I was listening to, because I try to follow all the gubernatorial candidates, and Jonathan Bush had a little short that he had put out, where he was talking specifically about the issue of housing and affordable housing and government. When the government builds housing, it costs 50% more to build than when it's done in the private sector. So why are we building houses as a government? Why aren't we just like easing regulations and letting the private sector do it, right? Because not only is the cost more, but now you're also taxing people to be able to do it, to be able to give people housing, which is taking money away from the economy, which could be going toward people improving their lives. So it's just... But if you understand basic economics, you get it.
And one thing that I would say is, for our investment club at UMaine, Spiffy, we recently just invested into a place, into a company that does commercial real estate, and they build like a ton of homes all at once. And the places with increasing populations, not like Maine, not Maine at all. In Texas, they can build hundreds of homes that look the exact same, that are cheap, that are affordable, and that are nice for the average middle class citizen. In Maine, we can never do that because our population's dropping. Older people probably don't want to live. I mean, and if you move to Maine, you probably want to have a few acres. And that is a problem. And we have a shrinking population that can't make affordable housing because they're not willing to do it, because no company is willing to come up here and invest in the state. And I feel like that's probably another reason why rents in Maine can get so high, because they're all single family homes, when if we had more affordable housing, the supply would be so much bigger. If we had
And when you
an
say
increased
affordable housing,
population.
it's important to understand, when you say affordable housing, you don't mean government funded housing, because I think that's what
No,
affordable housing
not at
has
all.
come to mean, because the Democrats seem to be able to control the flow of
Well,
information. So that's affordable housing. But housing
but
that is actually affordable is, led by the free market. And one of the things that's
yeah,
interesting about housing too, since we're on this topic, is I believe Maine has some of the old. Not only are we not able to build, and we're not really building that much due to regulation, due to the cost of doing it in the state of Maine, all these things, but on top of that, we have some of the oldest stock of housing in the country, because this isn't a
yeah,
new problem that people haven't been wanting to build, because we don't want. What's really interesting and peculiar about Mainers, especially Republicans, when it comes to town issues, they have very different views. That to me, as a Republican myself, I would say that I'm a Christian and a conservative, before I'm a quote unquote Republican, but I am, a Republican. And for me, I think part of that is about freedom, right? And it means like that if you own your house, you own your house, you own your land, you own your land. And
yeah,
that means people shouldn't be able to tell you what to do with it or not. And so if I own some land and I want to develop that land, let me do what I'm going to do. Just leave me alone.
yeah,
But when it comes to like city issues, I've seen substantial amounts of like conservatives at those levels saying, no, we don't want a skyrise in Portland. It's like, but like, do we believe in freedom? Do we believe that that's that person's property and they're allowed to do with it what they want, or do we not believe that? But this plays into, because like this is where even Republicans, to a degree, and I don't mean Republican legislators in Augusta, or the party, but I mean individual Republicans in towns and cities. They tend to vote somewhat more in favor of more restrictive things on people being able to do in their own, on their own property,
yeah,
than really makes sense to me, and helps keep this problem where it makes it much more cost effective to
yeah,
be able to build. So to your point, where somebody's going to come in and build like 1,000 houses or whatever, well, people in Maine are like, but I don't know that it will fit the aesthetic of the state of Maine.
yeah,
We don't want those types of communities like they have in Texas, where they have this place where all the homes look the same. It's
yeah,
like, anyway, so I don't know
yeah.
what your thoughts
100%.
are on that, but
I would say in certain parts of Maine, there's not a good aesthetic to begin with. Southern Maine, it gets pretty close. It's pretty, and I think in the state of Maine, as somebody that's business minded, I assume you're pretty business minded.
yeah,
Nobody really wants to invest in the state of Maine because it has decreasing population, like specifically commercial real estate and building homes. Like nobody wants to invest in the state of Maine because heat's way too high, gas prices, everything like that. Electric, bad. Decreasing population, that's not going to work either. So it makes it really hard to sell anything and pitch anything to anybody to invest in the state of Maine because there's nothing going on. I mean, there's also high taxes and there's government regulations, and it's specifically what you just said. People at local levels trying to take advantage of the Maine aesthetic, and it's like, well, if I go to Rumford or Old Town and go look at the mills, I'm like, I think there could be something a lot more useful there. I feel like,
yeah. Well, I think we need to be much more pragmatic, and we need to be more people focused, right? Like this is the issue. It's like, like what's interesting is some people, and I'm one of the people who looks at like the windmills as an example, right? So they, in the energy world,
Yeah.
we know that the windmills or the wind turbines, I guess somebody mocked me at one point for saying windmills, but that's what they look, that's what they are. I mean, they're, anyway, but the wind turbines, like, and I hate the way that they look, right? In the mountains. I go up into the mountains. I don't like that. But that's not the primary reason that I'm against them, because if they were actually leading to more human flourishing and I have to deal with a bit of an eyesore, okay. I mean, human beings are more important than that in my opinion, and I think they should be in everybody's opinion. And so like the question should be like, what do we need to do? Because like Mainers want a better economy, but they don't want things to change. And it's like, you can't have both, actually. Like if you actually want Maine's economy to grow, you need to want people to bring jobs here, which means more people are going to want to live here, which means more housing is going to need to be built, and which means we're going to have to put up with the fact that that means it's going to change, right? Like the problem isn't change in and of itself, it's change in a negative direction. And Portland, we've seen that, right? In Portland, I think when CharlieKirk was here, he talked about how he's been coming to Maine for 10 years and how Maine had shifted so much during that period of time. And change isn't bad if it's good change, right? Obviously. And so like building more houses, it's going to make it's going to make things look differently. But if that's leading to more human flourishing, if that's making it so that our kids and grandkids and stuff like that can continue to live and raise a family and grow up in Maine and start a business in Maine, then guess what? We should be for that. And I think most Republicans are, for the most part. But then we get into some of these categories where we end up being like, well, we don't want too many new families coming into our community, because then our schools are going to become more expensive. And it's like, but there's more people there and more people to pay taxes and more to share that load and create more opportunity for people to be able to stay. So it's one of the things that surprises me and confuses me a little bit about like some people even on the conservative side. And so it's really interesting. And you as a select board member, do you guys have restrictions on building in Vinalhaven? Or you said Vinalhaven, right?
Yeah, Vinalhaven. I don't know of very many. But there's no point of putting a skyscraper on the island. But we do have windmills. Our co-op is completely run on 3 windmills. So all the electricity that goes for Vinalhaven and North Haven is completely done by windmills. We don't have CMP or Vason. It's complete independent co-op. It's a very interesting concept. It's very well run and does a very good job, but it's a non-monopolized way to get electricity, and it's a lot better, in my opinion.
Well, it sounds like the people decided that they wanted to work with this situation, take this approach, and it's working.
Yeah.
So great.
Yeah, they figured it out.
The government spending millions and millions and billions of dollars of tax dollars to put up windmills that don't produce enough electricity, that's a whole nother story. But if it's working,
that's a different thing.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's the government taking my money and doing things that I don't want them to do with it. But if people, as a community decide that sounds great, and especially if it's working, given that variability of wind power, what's the solution to kind of when wind isn't producing power? What do you guys do?
It connects into the CMP pipeline. So we give a lot of electricity to CMP, our access, and then we at times don't have enough. So then they send the opposite way. It's a system. It makes it, I think it's definitely a couple cents cheaper per megawatt, which makes a big difference throughout the year. And we do have slightly lower energy costs, but also living on an island has different kind of costs, like specifically the ferry terminal and having the state run our ferry service. Casco Bay is different, like down for Peaks Island, other islands. It's all private organizations.
Yeah. Interesting. Well, that's so I want to shift to a couple other things because I wanted to make sure with limited time at this point. It's kind of late here in Kenya. But I did want to, like, one of the other things that I wanted to hear from you about, because there's been a couple of events up in Orono, and I want to talk about like the general mood and the general environment, like what you see from your peers. Like in terms of their political leanings and how strongly they hold them. Because like I'm a millennial, and millennials were like super liberal, and they were very social justice warrior-y, and their politics were really important to them. I was an anomaly, obviously, as a conservative all the way along. But millennials tend to swing more liberal. I think Gen Z, especially among men, is shifting a little bit. But what are you seeing on campus in terms of the general political mood? And because I think when I talked to one of the other members on here, Sophia Pride, I think, and she was. It sounded from her as though people have political views, but they're not necessarily as strongly held in the average person as maybe my experience in the millennials segment of the population. Yeah.
I would piggyback off of what Sophie said, and that's true. I would say, but a lot of men, especially, are pretty conservative. You go into most classrooms, especially the business school, especially engineering, very conservative, and it's very easy to see that they're conservative because they are healthy young men doing whatever they want, whenever they want to do it, and that's how they are. And it's that's how conservatives are. So, on campus, a lot of the time, so like during a lot of our events, we have positive outlooks because we also help bring in people from the community in Bangor and have them for our events. We do bring in a decent crowd. We're starting to do really well. But my first year, it was only me, my roommate, and one other person. And that was the group. Now it's at 15. Wow. We're doing better. I took over, and it's about 15 now. But for example, that Olivia Krolczyk event, we had 12 of us and 300 of them. 300 protesters, 12 people. We covered the front row of a lecture hall. That's it. And it was a loud event. They locked her into the Neville Hall. She couldn't get out of it for a certain amount of time. It was scary. The next time, we did better. We had 200 to 60, and we had Laurel Libby, and she did an amazing job, and she got out fine. And they had a Friendsgiving inside of the business school, and the business school kids were locked in there. And I walked in after to get some food. I sit down. They're like, "What's going on outside?" Because the whole entrance is completely blocked by 200 people, and you're yelling, cussing at people. They're just regular business school kids coming in to get some food and chat before Thanksgiving break. And they're like, "Whoever did that event was crazy." I'm just sitting there listening to them talk about this event that we just put on, and they have no idea at all. And I'm just sitting there eating a piece of pie or something like that. And it's just like, it's crazy how strong some people are of opinion wise. Like in the liberal arts school, they'll come there and they'll be very loud and they have strong opinions. But engineering school and business are usually leaning conservative, and they don't hold stronger to their opinions. The other schools, there's going to be like the environmental, a range of sciences and stuff like that. They probably would lean liberal. So I would say it's very, very 50-50. And a lot of the kids that commute are usually more conservative leaning. I would say, and UMaine's majority of commuters. It's an interesting campus thing because it's hard to grow the our group specifically. I wish we had more, but a lot of people commute back and forth, and you don't get to be face to face like we are right now very often with a majority of kids. I would say like 60%. You only get to see. They just go to class and they leave, and there's a couple thousand on campus, but there's 13,000 overall. So it's very hard to get face to face with people. And I feel like our group would be bigger, but it isn't. and it's kind of how it is.
It's interesting. I used to work in campus ministry at the University of Maine at Farmington, but I also, for a semester, InterVarsity Christian Fellowship was the organization, and I worked with them also up at Orono for a semester. And then I also did a few other things with the group, because I helped lead a freshman Bible study. And as those freshmen continued to progress throughout, I would kind of go up and do some stuff with them, be a guest speaker, and go on some of their like spring break, alternative spring break trips. But what I found interesting is I was coming from the University of Maine at Farmington, which is it's kind of like a closed campus. And basically, not everybody, but almost everybody lives on campus. And most of the people who don't live on campus live in apartments on the road that the university is on, or so close that it's very little difference than them being on campus. And so club organizations and things like that it's much easier to build them and grow them. I think at a campus like that. I more recently did volunteering with Crew, formerly known as Campus Crusade for Christ, at the University of Southern Maine. I helped, initially get a chapter going that start right before the pandemic started, and we actually continued and grew a little bit in the pandemic as the pandemic started, because I just immediately switched to Zoom, and we kept doing Bible study. And anyway, but what I found, similarly to like the problem that you're dealing with at Orono, they deal with at community colleges and things like that. It's really hard to have and grow an effective organization, I think, at some of those campuses. So that doesn't surprise me. It is a bit of a challenge, but I'd say keep at it. Anybody you can positively influence. And it's interesting that some people, and the person who is like, the people who were talking about as you kind of came into that dinner, who were like, people who put that on are crazy. I wonder, was it that they disagreed with the views and values that you were presenting, or anybody that opposes the woke mob is crazy and we just have a bunch of cowards in our society?
It was more of, they were in the atrium of the business school, and they were going to go get food for Friendsgiving. The business school was putting it on, and they were having plenty of people, and they completely blocked the entrance with protesters, because we did it in a lecture hall in the business school. And we had it so if you don't RSVP, you're not allowed in. So only 9 of them out of the 200, they probably just couldn't figure it out. 9 of them RSVP'd, we let them in. They're completely fine to stay. I don't mind. And the rest of them stayed outside and were scaring people when they walked in. And there was campus police and everything like that, and they'll only be allowed to come in one entrance and leave that same entrance, and it's completely blocked off another way. And they were loud. You could hear them during her speech, but the speech was uninterrupted. Olivia's was interrupted, and she didn't get to say her whole thing. But Libby, we've definitely improved, and Libby did a great job.
Yeah. Well, it's so interesting that, obviously, people who are paying attention to what's going on in politics in our country are not surprised that a bunch of crazy woke college students would try to, in the name of protecting democracy, silence speech that they don't like, right? But I mean, what were Olivia Krolczyk and Laurel Libby saying that's so bad that they need to protest these events? I mean, one of the things Laurel did, we put on an event for her in the Cumberland County Republicans this summer, actually in Topsom, slightly outside of Cumberland County, but we had a good venue. We put on this event, and we had at least 100 protesters, maybe 200 protesters as well. And at the end of the event, she came out and told them that what she was talking about at that point was free speech primarily. And she came out and said, I am going to continue to fight for your right to protest me, essentially, is what she came out and said. And it's like, so what are we protesting? Do you not think that certain people should have the right to speak? But what are those two women saying that were so damaging and dangerous that these people felt they needed to protest them?
Olivia was specifically, how do you say this? She was talking about men and women's sports, and specifically talking about that as she competed against a man in swimming. And Laurel said a lot about that, but also the free speech part of that. So very similar. She remains consistent, and she was talking very similar to what you were talking about. But the 200 people there were a lot younger and a lot more very loud. They're very powerful in what they believe. They had flags. They said they were anti-trans. The event was just her speaking about free speech. I think they really just don't like her. Honestly, I don't think they care about what she talks about, to be
A lot of
completely
them,
honest.
yeah, a lot of them don't even know, like, because we had some people when we did our event who sat outside and just engaged with them, and talked with them, and recorded some videos. The Unquirer has those posted way back on his page, or probably on MaineX community as well. But either way, like, they had conversations, and some of the people didn't even know what the event was about. They were just told that this was an anti-trans event. It's like being pro women is actually not anti-trans. First of all, I could go on and on about my views on the transgender cult and the
Yeah.
mental health crisis that is, both in terms of there's like two or three degrees of people who have mental health issues, people who think they're they're in the wrong body, people who agree with them that they're in the wrong body, and then parents who are like pushing some of this stuff. Right, like there's a lot of stuff going on in this, but these events specifically weren't even focused on it. They're just talking about getting males. I'm trying to stop using the term biological males, because that's the only kind of male is
Concedes to the
biological.
left.
Right. Males should not be competing with females, right? Like that's what we're about, and that's about safety. It's about fairness. And if you haven't already, reach out somewhere to sign the petition for protecting girls' sports and spaces, everyone. But like, it's so interesting that cult is so angry that they just have to go and yell at people and try to make people feel uncomfortable, for calmly and politely saying what they believe to be true.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. Well, no, it's cool. Well, I'm so excited to see every new person. What are your? This is kind of like a silly, but just for fun. Do you have? So you're already a politician,
Yeah.
because you're a selectman, but do you have future plans, or you're not thinking about that yet? Let me get my degree and figure out like down the road
Yeah.
what I might do. But yeah, do you want to run for higher office than select board at some point in your life?
I always want to remain involved with some kind of community that I live in, because CharlieKirk talked about if you're not engaged in your welfare of your nation, then I botched that quote so bad. If you're not involved, then it's not a good thing, basically.
Yeah.
I'll always try to stay involved in the community I live in. And I'd eventually, when I get out of college, I think I would love to do something business related and then keep my passion of politics and try to develop talent for the Republican Party, help them do what they need to do to get elected. Kind of my managerial side of my degree, because I really enjoy that. That's probably what I'll do for business as well, kind of more towards that, but also doing my passion of politics, doing a very similar thing, just in politics.
Yep.
But in the future, I'd love to become a congressman
Okay. Yeah.
later in my life. Professor or a congressman, one of the two.
Okay.
But yeah.
Nice. Cool. Well, thank you for standing up and speaking up and being willing to put on and go to and be participating in, after having the Olivia Krolczyk thing, not quitting and running away, but deciding, let's get the local person they hate and bring her in, and having a better process to make sure things are more safe. And I think that's all really, really incredible stuff. And just keep speaking truth, because like the reality is, like, if you can actually, and this is why CharlieKirk was so powerful, is because if you can actually engage these people in conversation in a polite way and just ask them questions, try to understand where they're coming from, try to find common ground, find things that we can agree on, because there's stuff there, okay, with a lot of people. And this is where one of the biggest issues that we have in being able to be successful at winning is that we're not doing a lot of this ground game stuff. The ground game isn't political activism as much as it is being a part of your community, knowing your neighbors, talking to them, being open, being willing to have conversations in a polite way, and trying to find that common ground. Because again, a lot of people we have common ground with. We definitely have areas where we don't have common ground, but there are a lot of areas for common ground, and it gives an opportunity. You can build a relationship through which you can speak a greater truth potentially down the road. And that's how we shift the culture in our nation, right? So like, keep having those conversations, keep bringing things up. And at the University of Maine at Orono, we Maine Republicans all across the state appreciate young people who are willing to stand up, speak up, and do it in a way that's like respectful and yet bold.
Yeah, 100%.
All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on, Payton. Keep up the good work, and we look forward to, hopefully you have some like fun event at some point where there's some cool stuff that we can have you back on again in the future. But I'm sure I'll see you at some point at some, political event. So.
Yeah, 100%. Thank you for having me on.
You're welcome. All right. See everybody else. I think it's possible I'll do another podcast this week. Who knows? If not, I'll be back on next week for sure, where Janet Bowden, I think is the name.
Oh, Lewiston.
Is running
Lewiston.
For the Lewiston House seat because somebody was appointed to staff, and so there's an open special election that's going to be in November. So she's going to be coming on. I think she one of her taglines is "Not your run-of-the-mill Janet." After Janet Mills, right?
Yeah.
So this is a good Janet, and so. She'll be on next Wednesday, to talk about what she's doing, why she's running, and then how let people know how they can help. So we'll see you back at the very least then. If not, maybe in a couple of days. All right. See you all. Thanks.
See ya.